This program is brought to you in part by the Eugenie and Joseph Jones Family Foundation, a local foundation proud to support education, the arts, and culture in the greater New Orleans area. Informed Sources is made possible in part by Susie and Pierre G. Villery.
We want to know more, do you? Informed Sources brings our region's top print and broadcast journalists together.
To examine the stories behind the headlines.
And we can all learn more.
Hello, I'm Marcia Cavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. Well, over a decade ago, it seemed like a good idea to move the control of the University of New Orleans out of the LSU system. Now, a better idea seems to be to move it back. If commuter students of the future drive Hyundais, they might be in vehicles manufactured partially in Southeast Louisiana, as was announced this week. We'll look at those stories as well as a complex proposed state constitutional amendment that could have a major impact on government funding. Plus, we will take a deep dive into the argument over what to call the Gulf. Also, a local Social Security office has been closed, supposedly temporarily, in the era of Trump-Musk. Should we be worried? Joining us tonight to look at these stories are Errol, Laborde, producer of Informed Sources, Stephanie Riegel, staff writer, The Times-Picayune, The New Orleans Advocate, Will Sutton, columnist, The Times-Picayune, The New Orleans Advocate, and Greg LaRose, editor, Louisiana Illuminator. And we go over to Errol first because the University of New Orleans story now is maybe it'll go back into the LSU system.
Yeah, let me begin with a tutorial here.
Yeah.
That there are two systems in Louisiana that govern higher education. One is the LSU system, which of course governs big LSU and some of the satellite universities like in Eunice and in Shreveport. And then there's what's called the University of Louisiana system, which governs all of the other colleges pretty much, UL and Lafayette and Nichols and Southeastern. It has right now it's 9 colleges that are in there. Originally, UNO was part of the LSU system, and then about over a little decade ago, people said, well, we need to change because we're just like a stepchild in this system. Let's go into the University of Louisiana system where at least we're an equal and we can get more attention. So that happened. It became part of that. And apparently it just hasn't been, no one's really happy with it. No one's seeing too much success. So now there's been a movement to change it back to UNO, back to the University of Louisiana, to the LSU system. And pushing it really two powerful individuals in the legislature, Cameron Henry, who's the president of the Senate, and Philip de Villiers, who's the House Speaker. So they have asked the Board of Regents, which is yet another board in this, which governs overall higher education, to do a study. And then last week they came out with a study saying, we think, you should move it back to the LSU system. Came up with all kind of reasons to do it. And so it looks like it's going to happen. And there doesn't seem to be strong opposition from the University of Louisiana system or from the LSU system. So I would think if you got a bill and the Speaker of the House and the President of the Senate are both behind it, and there's no vocal opposition, and if someone does oppose it, they have to come up with a way to make up a $30 million deficit and to double the enrollment size at UNO. That's could probably happen. So I think it's going to be in the future where it's going to go back to the system. Now, a lot of things we don't know. We don't know all the mechanics of the procedure or how to do it. I don't know about the name change either. Anything has been said. Will it go back to being LSU, as it used to be? Or in its last days, they just keep on calling it UNO. It's just that there's an asterisk that says part of the LSU system. So that needs to be resolved. The president, and in the UL system, the administrator at the local level is called a president. In the LSU system, the administrator is called a chancellor. And so the president, who on the LSU to be a chancellor. Kathy Johnson has really worked diligently. She's been here. She's fairly new. I haven't heard anything bad about her. We don't know. I don't know where she lands in this if she stays, but she's had a tough time. She's had to make a lot of cutbacks, cut back a lot of positions, close some departments, close some buildings, and so it's been a very unhappy time to be ruling at UNO. So all this is still waiting to be happening and to be resolved. So I'm saying if you kind of read the leaves here, I think this is going to happen. I think this is in progress, but man, a whole lot of questions still need to be answered.
And University of New Orleans certainly historically now very, very important to this community. It helped develop the middle class. It opened its doors as LSUNO in 1958. And then in the mid-70s, the letters LS were dropped and it became University of New Orleans, which it's been known as for most of its existence.
Yeah, and the line about developing a middle class, that's not to be taken lightly because it's true.
Right.
That before LSUNO opened, that was like in 1958, New Orleans did not have a state university. Just about every other city in the country had a state university. The nearest state university, I guess at the time, would have been Southeastern or maybe Nichols, or going up the road to LSU. And so if there's a student who maybe didn't have a lot of money and couldn't be traveling back and forth or didn't have a scholarship, that wasn't available. And so UNO provided that, and so it really provided a lot of opportunity, and plus things that it did for the community. If UNO was to stop today, it could get accolades just for establishing the World War II Museum. I mean,
that's absolutely true.
That was all part of the legacy too.
And when it first started, it was known as a commuter campus. That's because it was just that, and most of the students came from the community. Now it's called Urban University.
And it still is a commuter college
yes,
campus, and that's part of I think the hoard cell in terms of getting that for kids who want the college experience and going out of town and getting away from the parents and everything. It doesn't have that, but
it does have residential now component, a pretty large one. Didn't have it when you and I were out there so much, but now it does. Okay, E, thanks a lot. Stephanie, big news this week regarding a steel plant in Louisiana that's going up. Hyundai steel plant.
Hyundai and Governor Jeff Landry and Louisiana Economic Development made official on Monday of this week what we reported back in January, which is that Hyundai is going to build a steel mill near Donaldsonville in West Ascension Parish on a big industrial tract of land that's going to manufacture steel components that will be used at Hyundai and Kia auto plants in Alabama and South Carolina. And this has been in the works for several months. Back in October, you may remember, Governor Landry took a trade delegation over to South Korea. We later found out it was specifically to woo the Hyundai folks and to let them know we really want you in Louisiana. It's a huge economic development win for the Landry administration, which has notched several impressive wins, provided all of these plants and facilities come to fruition. It's also a smart move on Hyundai's part, or at least it was at the time it was announced, to try to get ahead of some of the Trump administrative tariffs that have been threatened and to a certain extent, imposed, because if they manufacture the steel in this country and use it at a domestic auto plant, so in this country, then presumably you would think they would be able to avoid the tariffs. But who really knows? I mean, I think, one of my editors asked this week, are the latest round of tariff threats going to affect this plant? And all we can say is it's really too soon to say, because we don't know how all this shakes out. The news on the tariffs changes from day to day, and what the global ramifications of them are is anyone's guess.
But, sure, you might be making your steel here, but everything else in that car is coming from somewhere else.
Right, and so will that affect Hyundai's decision to move forward with the plant? We don't know. But as of today, it is going forward and was celebrated very much by the economic development folks and the folks in Ascension Parish who created this industrial district, for lack of a better word, several years ago. I mean, they negotiated deals with the landowners. It's a very rural area. And they said, if we can attract a plant to this area, can we strike a deal in advance, basically, to take over this land? And so they've cobbled together a really nice shovel-ready site. Again, from an economic development standpoint. From an environmental standpoint, it's a different issue. And we've seen a lot of pushback in neighboring West St. James Parish to some of the massive chemical plants that have been proposed and built in that community. There hasn't been as much activity in West Ascension, so we haven't seen the level of opposition to projects because there haven't been projects. But it may happen with respect to this project. And in the immediate aftermath of the announcement by Monday afternoon, the press releases were starting to come by the Bucket Brigade and some of the other organizations that raise rightful concerns about what it will mean to fence-line communities. The flip side of the argument is that this is a clean burning facility as proposed, at least what we know about it. It would burn natural gas, so it's not like coal or something.
And so it's Ascension Parish, right?
West Ascension Parish, yes.
Where the plant will be built. Give us an idea, though, exactly where. What's near it? What community?
Well, I mean, Donaldsonville is the closest thing, and so it's just a few miles up the river from Donaldsonville. I forget how many miles, but it's right in that area. And the West Ascension Economic Development Organization created this megaplex site, like I said, some years ago. So it's really not far away at all from the small city of Donaldsonville.
You know, it was intended for something else, but that development didn't take shape. Is that correct?
I'm not sure about that.
Okay.
Now, the one in Richland Parish, where the Meta AI facility is going to go, was originally going to be an auto plant, and that's how that major industrial site sort of came together. But you know, I mean, this has been something that, like, over the past 15 years, some of those rural economic development organizations or in rural parishes have worked to create what we call shovel-ready sites that can attract big manufacturers, and this one would be like a $5 billion plus facility that supposedly will create 1,300 permanent jobs and several thousand construction jobs.
And it would
significantly
change that community and that area if you just think about the salaries that they're talking about and where those people would have to live and their expectations for schools.
Yes.
And
look,
services.
Ascension Parish has been one of the fastest growing parishes in South Louisiana. It has a good school system. I mean, when I was living in Baton Rouge, we were always reporting about the flock to Livingston and Ascension parishes, which were growing much, much faster than East Baton Rouge, certainly. Now, this is West Ascension, not East Ascension, but there's a lot of potential there.
Errol, did you have a comment?
Well, I was going to say that Louisiana could be heading for big of a boom here. If this comes together, the area around Donaldsonville, I mean, that's the big growth, but also what you referred to with the upstate thing in Richmond Parish, that'd be close in the area of Monroe.
Sure.
That's going to be a huge, huge project. So if you get that project and this one, there's a lot of economic activity in the state.
I've lived through enough booms, though, where we in the media write about all these big announcements, and a lot of them don't come to fruition. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen with either of those. I'm just saying it's early to be saying this will be a boom. This could be, and there are so many things up in the air right now. I'm cautious.
All right, well,
I'm not going to even say cautiously optimistic because I hate that expression. But
you will keep us informed.
I hope so.
Yeah, okay, very
Thanks.
good. All right, well, over to you. You wrote a piece about your concerns regarding Social Security, and just folks being able to reach or talk to somebody regarding their claims or their benefits might get more difficult.
Well, indeed. And as somebody who's been looking at Social Security more recently in the last several years to decade, I'm in tune with this a bit more than perhaps somebody who's 25, 35, or even 45. And, those of us who have paid into the system, we've had an expectation that when it comes our time, that we will get the benefits that we paid into the system to receive at a later age. The things that are going on with the Trump administration around Social Security, they've in recent days posted some releases to say everything they're saying is false. That we're being transparent and we're going to save money, and so they're making some of these moves so fast that they haven't thought through how that can be communicated. So in hindsight, some of the offices have rooms and spaces that will be closing. Well, they didn't say on the front end that the whole office wouldn't be closing, but these hearing rooms where we now do these video conferences for your hearings would be closed. And so that begins to make more sense, But someone like me wants to know, if I don't want to talk to somebody on the phone, can I go into my local office and see somebody, make the time, and walk through this process? In the case of New Orleans on Poydras, that office has been closed since mid-March. And on the website it says it's closed due to construction until April 18th. Well, I tried to reach Social Security, and they did not respond to the what is the construction. And is it true that you will open on this date in April? If it's true, why wouldn't you say, yes, of course it's true, and it's going to be a better office because we're doing these things and we'll be able to serve better?
Right,
So I
and
don't
this is
get
all in
it.
the context that we keep hearing that there are going to be thousands of people laid off from the
7,000.
administration. Yeah, thousands and thousands. So this office downtown right now is not working, let's say, at the present time.
They're
We're hoping it'll
working,
come back.
they're working
but-
remotely.
Okay, all right, working remotely. Where can you go if you want a face-to-face with someone here
You can
in
go
the
to
metro
Algiers,
region?
you can go to Kenner. For what I need to do, I'm going to go to Kenner. It's not like Kenner is going to another state. But I'm used to going to my New Orleans Poydras office. I know when and where to park. I know which elevator to get on. I know that I'm going to stand in line if it's early enough, and I know which metal device I'm going to go through.
And you know perfectly to make an appointment. You should make an appointment, really,
because
if you don't want to wait forever.
you can lose a lot of time. You can go there without an appointment and spend 6 hours.
Yeah.
But even with an appointment, it's difficult.
And think about if you have to rely on public transit to get out to Kenner or even
Well,
Algiers.
that's right.
An appointment time's sort of like really up in the air.
Well,
Right.
that's right. And
And then the Homa office did close, is that correct?
well, they clarified that because they put it on a list of scores of offices that would have closures. But they're now saying that a hearing room in the Homa office will be closed, and that's a part of saving millions of dollars by closing this part. But it would be helpful if they'd be more transparent, as they say, we're being more transparent.
Well, it certainly has a lot of people concerned, certainly Social Security recipients, and
Yes.
there are many
Yes.
sitting here at this table.
Yes, and I heard from
it's a
some.
concern among, I bet you have. Okay, we'll see how it all plays out. Thanks a lot, Will. All right, Greg, something important for us tomorrow is Election Day, Saturday, March 29th, and we have 4 constitutional amendments to consider, and we have a list that we can bring up of the various points that we are going to have to vote yea or nay on. But we really wanted to explore Amendment number 2. You can see it coming up right now. Here we go. So overhaul of budget, tax, allowance, and limitations.
Yeah.
What does that all mean? What is number 2?
It's the double whopper with cheese and all the fixins. This has been boiled down from, I want to say, 115 pages of legislation to an amendment that does several things that I won't go into too much specifics, other than to say that it's kind of tweaking some funds within the Constitution, combining a couple, getting rid of 3 others, and sort of the sweetener in all of this to essentially provide an overhaul of the state tax system. Governor Landry and legislators were successful in tacking on a pay increase or a pay provision, let's call it, to the amendment. The last 2 years, teachers and support staff at public schools have received stipends that the legislature has decided, okay, we're going to go ahead and approve them. This amendment, if approved, would essentially make those stipends permanent. So there's a debate on whether or not you want to call it a raise because those employees have been getting this money. The critics of Amendment 2 just feel it's way too complicated. It's very open-ended and also cedes a lot of control over these funds from the voting public to the legislature. So they'll be able to make spending decisions on these stability funds that they turn to sort of a rainy day fund without having to put it before a vote of the public. So there's a lot going on here. from a standpoint of the governor and supporters who've come behind this, we recently published a story that totaled the amount put into campaigns at about $500,000. Likewise, opponents have spent around the same amount saying, vote no on all four. Another one of the amendments, 3, which would again remove juvenile crime designations from the Constitution and move them to lawmakers who would then be able to add to them. They say they will. It's another instance. That's where I think a lot of the no sentiment is coming from, folks who feel as though that when it comes to juveniles, let's look for more therapeutic.
And being charged as adults, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what that deals with. What about, back to the taxes, the income tax reduction, the individual and corporate tax reduction that came out of the special session, is that in place whether Amendment 2 passes or not?
Yeah, it's in place. That went into effect starting, well, for this tax year, so it wouldn't show up until we go to pay our taxes in the following year. So none of that really changes, regardless of the amendment's outcome. There is an element in Amendment 2 that deals with the standard deductions. It sort of feeds into that. And that, again, I think was like another sweetener to where if you could claim a higher deduction, your taxes would be lowered. But the bigger sell on this has been, trying to get the teachers in favor of it. And the governor has mentioned that a lot on a recent Chamber of Commerce speaking tour. And just earlier this week, he put out a video on social media where he basically pinned the opposition to billionaire left fundraiser or donor George Soros. You can connect the dots, but one of the organizations, the Vera Institute, does receive funds from Soros, but there's no evidence showing that money from Soros has been spent specific to this campaign against the amendments in Louisiana.
Is the teachers union statewide supporting it? Because when they have a powerful get out the vote machine.
They are. They are behind it. They've not really, to my knowledge, put out like an active campaign to say go out and vote or we're behind it. They essentially took their stand and sort of left it at that.
I thought it was interesting that in the Picayune's endorsements on number 2, they pretty much praised the spirit of the amendment, congratulated the governor and legislature, but then said no. The reason they said no is because it's just too much. It's too much to digest. There needs to be more vetting on this. 115-word document.
I think, yeah, and we've seen like the Public Affairs Research Council of Louisiana, who knows the amendments backwards and forwards. I think they look at it and say there's potentially some good government practices in it, but because you're throwing in so many other elements, making it contingent on this rewrite of Article 7. I mean, keep in mind, last year we were talking about whether or not a constitutional convention would be convened specifically for Amendment 7. It's a lot. If you have gone into that, or when you go into the voting booth on Saturday, and maybe if you looked at it during early voting, it's a lot. Like, I wouldn't advise waiting to read that amendment.
Let me correct one thing. I said 115-word document. I mean 115 pages.
Yeah, one more time, if we could bring that graphic up, Michael, so that people could see the address, the email, the website address there for the Public Affairs Research Council. You want to go dig into it a little bit more, you can go to their site, certainly, and find out a whole lot more about all of these amendments.
They do a great job. We turn to them regularly to explain things in plain English.
All right. Thanks a lot, Greg. Okay, we're going to wrap up with you, Stephanie, because we are officially now in the state of Louisiana and the Aquarium of the Americas, located near the Gulf of America.
Apparently so, yes. And so we reported a story Wednesday, I guess, that the Audubon Nature Institute, which owns the aquarium, is now referring to the Gulf as the Gulf of America in all of its exhibits, but that primarily affects the big Gulf exhibit, the 400,000-gallon saltwater tank with the submerged barnacle-covered derrick and all of the big stingrays and sharks that swim around. And in a memo that was issued to employees in late February, the new CEO of Audubon, Michael Sawaya, explained the rationale for it, saying he wanted to be consistent with what the federal government was basically doing, an organization called the Geographic something IS information system, and that it was best to be accurate and consistent. Now, of course, this is not universally adopted, and we know the Associated Press is in hot water with the Trump White House for not adopting Gulf of America. It still uses Gulf of Mexico, and other institutions have handled it in different ways. Encyclopedia Britannica, I noticed, for instance, uses Gulf of Mexico / Gulf of America, which is one option. But Audubon has decided apparently what side of this political issue it wants to be on, and so it changed the name and tried to reach some board members. Remember, Audubon is controlled by two boards, the Nature Institute Board, which is in charge of managing day-to-day operations, and the Audubon Commission, which is a quasi-political advisory board that oversees the finances. And Sawaya did say that this was an operational issue, and so the board did not need to weigh in, and that he had not sought input for it.
Okay. So to Louisianians now, when we go over to the Florida Panhandle, we're going to be lounging there on the Gulf of America.
Well,
It seems like there needs to be more of a process to change something as historic like this.
And there are, internationally, I suppose there are bodies that determine what things are going to be called. It seems very jingoistic, and so for political reasons one can take issue with this, but other governments do this, and historically governments and leaders change the names of bodies and places all the time. So
France
it's
can
not
change,
like
France can change the English Channel to the French Channel.
It
overnight.
could, I suppose so. And maybe we'll see more of that now that we've set the precedent for it.
Spanish explorers named the Gulf of Mexico. The Gulf of Mexico, what, 500 years ago?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. Okay. All right, well, okay. Whatever it is, it's pretty. It's pretty, and we have to watch it when storms roll around. Okay, E, other stories.
People who rely on the Canal Street streetcar, that's the red streetcar, have been inconvenienced for a long time now because it only goes like as far as the Joy Theater if you're going downtown because of the construction. And so the rest of people have to get out and walk or take a bus. And they say it goes back to the Hard Rock and things that still need to be done. But we ask, and they say 3 more weeks. In 3 more weeks, everything will be complete, and then the whole line will be running again. So that'll be good.
Right.
That'll be good news, Stephanie.
Yeah, big in-person mediation talks beginning next week in the Archdiocese of New Orleans bankruptcy case as the 5-year anniversary approaches. So.
Okay. Well,
we having an election this weekend, and pretty soon we actually will have another. And a lot of people are not realizing that, but in New Orleans, we're going to have a vote on a millage for the sheriff's office. And so I'm looking at that, and I'd love to hear what people think as I take a closer look at that.
okay, very good. Right.
There's a lawsuit filed against a Louisiana justice of the peace that really challenges state law as to how those justice courts use the fees that folks who are facing eviction or auto repossessions are charged because the justices can pull from those fees to greatly augment their salaries. And there's, again, a lawsuit that's challenging the way that's done.
All right, guys. Thanks a lot for being here, and thank you all for joining us. We will see you again next week for Informed Sources. Have a good evening.
Informed Sources is made possible in part by Susie and Pierre G. Villery.
From Masterpiece to Nova, Antiques Roadshow to Agatha Christie.
And of course, stepping out and Informed Sources.
We are pleased to support public television.
It's been our passion.
For a lifetime.
This program is brought to you in part by the Eugenie and Joseph Jones Family Foundation, a local foundation proud to support education, the arts, and culture in the greater New Orleans area.